Welcome to the positive corner of the YouTube universe. And today, hard to believe, but we're going to talk about Toronto real estate. It's hard to think the two right now are going hand in hand, but there is some positivity out there, and it's not all bad. No one will probably watch this podcast because of that, because everybody just seems to want to dig into the bad news. But if you're in the real estate market, thinking about getting in the real estate market, and just want to hear maybe a little bit of a different narrative as to what we're seeing boots on the ground, we're here to share those experiences with you. Please be sure to hit that like or subscribe button. If you have any comments, we'd absolutely love to hear from you. My name is Ralph Fox, and I'm the co-founder and broker of record of Fox Marin. And today we have the lovely, the talented, the fabulous Kori Marin, co-founder and broker at Fox Marin. Kori, so lovely to see you today. It's been a while.
Ralph, it's been so long since I last saw you, a whole 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, what time is it?
For those of you who don't know us, we do live together and work together. So we do spend an awful lot time together.
Why do I have to use the word awful?
No, I don't mean to.
As a descriptor.
Yeah, it's not awful. It's awesome.
It's amazing, especially to be in real estate right now. But that's a whole other topic that we're going to dig into. And Kori, I know you have some data that you'd like to share, as well as some case studies as to what we've seen just in the last couple of weeks, boots on the ground. So without further ado, Kori, take it away.
Perfect. Well, I think it's just interesting to consider what is actually moving in the market. What is working and what is not working, and what are buyers buying and what are sellers selling? And so I was looking at some of the stats today, and I find it a little interesting that I want to share with our viewers today to set up some of these case studies, which really proves what the data is telling us. And so I think this is interesting as we're looking at it from the right hand side of the brain and then the left hand side of the brain. And I think it's amazing when the two of them meet in the middle and we see results. So let's jump into a few numbers. We're not going to drone on the analytical side today. I want to get a little bit more tactile and talk about these properties and why they've done so well. But you have to consider that in May of this year, in TREB, which is the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board, there was 6,200 plus transactions that moved through the system over the month. So yes, that is down 13% versus last year. So less volume moving through the system, completely acknowledging that. Also acknowledging that we have way more inventory sitting on the market than we did last year at this time. But we still did have 6,200 plus transactions. And then when you compare April 2025 to May 2025, we actually saw an uptake seasonally adjusted of 8.4%. So 8.4% more transactions from April to May, of course, acknowledging things make a difference, seasonality, the weather. We kind of had a late spring. Things were really delayed with some of the other political events that were taking place, including the federal election and the tariff threats, whatever you want to say about that. Some interest rate announcements sprinkled in there. But we still saw more volume in May than we did in April. Now, I am not suggesting that the market's turning. I'm not suggesting this is the beginning of a pattern. But what we wanted to talk about today is there was still this number of transactions. So who's buying? What are they buying, and what are sellers selling, and are they seeing good results? A few other things I wanted to talk about are what asset types are doing well? What price points are singing? Where are people seeing these successes? So the semi-detached, as Ralph and I have been forecasting since the beginning of the year, are outperforming all of the other asset types. And this has a lot to do with the fact that they offer a value proposition to young families, but they're still relatively, and I'm putting air quotes around this, affordable for some people moving up the property ladder. So of course, the semi-detached asset class is doing the best out of all types of properties in the TREB system. But what's interesting is the mid-priced homes between $600K and $1.5 million is the most active segment, which is not really all that shocking. However, they've taken up roughly 70% of all of the transactions so far in 2025. So that's telling you that affordability has a lot to do with this. First-time home buyers people moving possibly from their first condo into their first house if they can get rid of their condo, which is a whole other conversation. And we're certainly seeing the bank of mom and dad helping so many people get into the market in this sweet spot per se. The detached home category has seen some of the biggest hits because you have to think detached is the most expensive. However, in May, they took up 48% of the transactions in the GTA. So that's really interesting too. Are we seeing the beginning of a little bit of a bounce back? Have we reached the bottom? Are we over a little bit of this correction? Are people feeling a bit more confident about the market now that we're kind of over some of this geopolitical election sort of distraction that we've been humming in over the last 12 to 18 months? And then entry level condos under 600,000 are starting to move if buyers are feeling like they're getting a significant deal. If they feel like there's a major discount, if they feel like they're scoring something awesome at a really good price. Now, totally acknowledging here too, especially for our Toronto people, you're not going to get something really massive at that price point in a really downtown district. So this is really going to be catering more to a little bit more outside of the GTA. If we're thinking about condos under 600,000, condos under 600,000 in the downtown proper are pretty small. And then what else did I want to add to this? The luxury market. So let's call luxury for the sake of this conversation. Over 2 million has experienced a little bit of a prolonged slowdown, which we've seen on some properties, but we're definitely seeing the buyer psychology is driving activity towards move-in ready. So turnkey properties in well-located areas that are priced right. And we have the proof today when we talk about our case studies. Ralph, is there anything else you want to add to this before we jump into some of these properties that we've recently sold?
Of course I do. I always have to get
do?
my 2 cents in. Again, by no means are we saying that the market is ripping. We're at
No.
about 30,000 listings on the MLS, which is the most ever. We are also in an environment where we are so low in transactions that it looks like we'll be under 60,000, maybe around 55, 58 for the year. So to give context, in 2021, the height of the market, there was somewhere around 121,000 transactions. So transactions are way down. There's a lot of inventory that's out there, but properties are selling and buyers are buying. And there's various reasons. Not all of them are investment driven. And going back to what you were saying, Kori, about the luxury side, I mean, I just want to point out our case studies are on the sale side. But just to give context, in the last 10 days, we had clients purchase a $6 million property and they were moving up from their home. So they were move uppers. And we had other clients buying a $2 million home over the weekend, actually, and they were moving up as well. When there are situations with families and there's equity in properties, we do see movement into that class and people who are in that position to do so are doing so without real hesitancy. So there are buyers out there for sure on the luxury side. I think to me, what's most interesting is starting to see, and we've talked about this before, buyers and maybe even talk of investors at the entry condo price point. And that's something we just haven't seen in a very long time. There's a few members of our team who have multiple clients now looking to get into that entry condo level. And that is something that's, again, somewhat anecdotal, but it's a return of a certain class of buyer that we haven't seen in a very long time. And if you look at the trend line of sales moving up from April to May, they actually moved up. I don't know the exact percentage, but from March to April. So it'll be very interesting in early July when we see the June data. Does this trend continue with a month over month uptick? And I think the other thing that's just so interesting is to see condos with all this inventory still hovering at an average price of around $700,000. It's pretty mind-blowing. And I think if you actually start to drill down a bit on the numbers, you will see that we had a bit of a run-up last year in anticipation in June of that first interest rate cut where people thought a lot of buyers were going to rush to market. And that really never happened. It kind of fizzled. And so if we look at prices since about August, we're basically just flat. So we've been maintaining this flat line despite the slowdown. So prices are somewhat stable month over month. And since about August, despite the increase in inventory, and I think despite all the doom and gloom out there are properties selling. 5,000, close to 5,000 people transacted in May. And some of those were our clients. And so I think we're going to talk about, or we are going to talk about what we saw on the sales side, but we're still seeing a significant amount of activity on the buy side as well.
Just one thing, it was over 6,000 transactions in May.
Well, thank you. It was more than I remembered.
Yes. So I just want to be clear about that. And then the last thing I want to add to this before we dive into the case studies, and we'll talk about this anecdotally when we talk about the properties, is that when Ralph and I get to observe open houses, it's a very interesting time for us to see what the buyer pool actually looks and feels like and talk to people. And so one thing I really notice, and maybe it's just because I'm getting older, which is depressing within itself, but I'm always so amazed by how young the buyers are, which is really showcasing that the bank of mom and dad is a very real thing. And when we sold this amazing loft recently, there was a lot of young purchasers in there with their parents, and their parents really encouraging their kids to get into the market while we are skewed more on the buyer side, especially on the condo segment. So there were a lot of parents there with their kids, holding different feature sheets and going from one house, open house to another, and really being the parents trying to drive the inspiration for their kids to get into the market while there is this window of opportunity. Again, I'm not trying to drive FOMO for everybody in the comments section that thinks that's what I'm trying to do. It's just interesting to see it and observe it and talk to these people, and to see parents really want to see their kids be able to jump into the market and be so supportive. So we'll see.
And you have a longtime friend who you've helped out, and they're looking to buy for their young daughter as an investment, similar to what their father did for them when they were young. I think that's just so interesting that they see this window right now and they're trying to capitalize on it. So that's a story as well that's really not getting reported on, that we're seeing happen more often than you would think.
Yes. I would have loved to have had the bank of mom and dad when I bought my first property. That would have been so amazing. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, let's get into this because we've got some really interesting properties to dive into today. And I'm going to pull up case study number 1. If you follow us on Instagram, which I totally encourage you to do, this one was a hot commodity.
What's the Instagram handle, Kori, for those wondering?
_Fox Marin. And you can find it in our show notes below. But this one went buck wild on Instagram, even with organic engagement. And this is, as you can just see here on the screen, it's just the charm factor is oozing from this property. Okay. This is 28 Wheatfield Road. Even the street name itself is adorable. And this is this perfect entry-level detached house located in Mimico. Mimico is really Lakeshore Boulevard and Royal York. The thing I love about the location is that it's very neighborly, full of tree-lined streets, well-kept properties, pride of ownership. And it kind of feels like how Toronto was when we all grew up in it. Like there's still kids playing on the street. There's parks full of families. It feels very safe, and the neighbors have got your back, and people are helping, shovel your driveway in the winter or help mow your lawn when you're away at the cottage in the summer. It's got a lovely community feel. And the other thing about the location, which of course, location is the first rule of real estate, is that it's mega accessible to the downtown core, but then you're also accessible to the airport and to Billy Bishop as well. So I loved the location. And there's walkability to obviously the lake and the hiking trails and all that kind of stuff, plus amenities nearby. So let's break down this property a little bit more. So this is detached. It's a 2-story. It's 3 bedrooms with 1 washroom upstairs, a really adorable main floor, which we're going to show you some of the photos. It did have the 2 washrooms. So it had another washroom in the basement. It was a 34 by 124-foot lot. It also had its own private driveway for 4 cars in tandem. And the lot itself had a private fence, and the lot was just exceptional. Like it just oozed greenery and like a playfulness in the back, and your kids could go out and play and your dog could go play fetch. Like it just had this charm about it, which I know is an overused adjective when it comes to real estate description, but it truly was a heart tugger. And Ralph and I have been exposed to this property for many years because we have leased this property on behalf of the owners for several years and have always loved this house. And so when we had the good fortune to prepare it for sale, we just knew that the outcome would be exactly like the aesthetic that you see here on the screen. So we painted everything white. We painted the outside of the house white. We
That
did,
was the game changer, painting the outside white, and it
oh
was
my
such
gosh.
a balls up move to do that because it was a little risky, especially for the neighborhood. But everyone who came to the open house, there was families across the road just being like, "Oh my God, we just love it. It's white." It brought out the charm, as you were saying, and the character, and really just the cute factor where it just had that feeling like I have to have this house. It was such a great idea, and full props to Kori for coming up with that idea.
Well, thank you, Ralph.
Anytime.
And the other thing, this is a century home. The house is 100 years old. And what happens a lot, and guys, like if you're listening, I know you're going to understand what I'm saying, is a lot of people go into these adorable houses in this neck of the woods and they rip out all the charm. They just strip the charm
Yeah.
out of the property. And then they do something called what I like to call the Home Depot renovation. And they'll bring in like condo style features and finishes into these like wonderful little houses, and then they're devoid of all of their character after. Like they smell like a Home Depot after the renovation is done. And so the fact that this house still had some of its original key elements to it and a throwback to nostalgia really just protected the integrity of the property and is what drew a lot of people to the home, which I just loved. And we were able to accentuate that by adding some white paint, obviously doing the exterior, being really selective with our staging as always. We painted the kitchen a beautiful olive green color. And then we just didn't do anything that was like super modern in there. We kept it feeling like we wanted the creaky floors and we wanted it to feel like, a house where if you could imagine yourself having Christmas morning or like baking cookies with your kids. Like it had that factor to it. So we knew that it was a special property. So Ralph and I worked with our awesome sellers who are just the most trusting of us ever because they don't even live here. And I don't think we've even ever met them in person. We have like a complete online relationship with these awesome people. And we listed the property at 1,198 million. And then we held back on offers to elicit hopefully a bidding war. And so the reason that we do that is because we never want to cap the value of a property. This permits a lot of people to come see the property and be inspired by it in the hopes of eliciting more than one offer, because our job as the selling agents is to get the highest and best price for the seller. So we were strategic in doing that. And another thing that we're really aware of is in this market environment, we don't want to list too low. We want to list lower than market value, but we don't want to be obnoxious about it. Like, are buyers really going to be able to wrap their heads around spending $400,000 or $500,000 more than the list price in today's market conditions? I don't feel like they are. They just don't have the mental bandwidth for that kind of stretch. So
And
we want to
and
be
and
right.
interrupt you for a sec as
Yeah.
well. We see this mistake that a lot of listing agents make or sellers make is sometimes when they list too high, because
Yes.
then a buyer or buyer's agent is looking at this being like, oh my gosh, they want on top of this price another 10% because that's what it looks like they're posturing for. We've seen this happen many times. So if you're a listing agent or seller out there, you just have to understand that your list price is a marketing number, and it has to be really, really strategically thought out, especially in an environment like this, in tandem with pricing it low and holding off on offers.
Yes. And we felt confident using this strategy because we knew this property was going to speak to a large buyer pool, particularly in the first time home buyer category, which we talked about at the top of the podcast being like a very large percentage of the transactions. are this particular price point in category. So for your information and for your data collection, this got about over 40 private showings. And then on the open houses that we ran on Saturday and Sunday, there was over 40 groups coming through. So that's quite a few eyeballs on the property.
I would say that was per day. It was,
Oh, per day.
yeah, I was there.
Oh.
I was there for both of them. I had to think for a sec. Yeah, that would have been probably closer to per day. So
Oh, perfect.
There was a lot of energy and a lot of people who were fairly seriously looking. Not too many looky-loos. You always get those, but there was significant amount of those groups that were actually serious buyers who are actually considering looking at purchasing a property in and around this price range and price point, feeling much more reminiscent of a stronger market than actually, what the stats are showing about what's happening today in the market.
Amazing. The one thing I will add to this is this did very well in terms of showings and obviously your information about the open houses, Ralph.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't explode with private showings. It wasn't like the back in the day when there'd be 90 to 100 private showings. So 40 is a nice moderate amount. It's definitely more than you would see on a condo or a condo townhouse.
Oh my gosh, yes.
But it didn't explode where there was 9 showings a day back to back and agents were fighting over keys on the front lawn like we've seen back in the olden days.
I got a couple scraps.
Yeah. I've had scraps.
Oh, yes. You're the feisty one.
No, everyone thinks I'm so nice, but I can go there if I have to get my clients into the property.
Oh, yeah.
So what did this elicit? What was the result? So we ended up getting 5 offers on the offer date, which is amazing. So remember the environment that we're working on. I think 5 offers is incredible. The sellers were very happy with that. We sold it in the end for 115% of the asking price, and we sold it for 138. So this aligned with expectations. The sellers were very happy with this price. The buyers were ecstatic. This was a win-win for everyone. And it sold in 8 days. So why did this property do so well? It had the lovable factor. It obviously had a great lot. It's detached. It had a private driveway, lots of parking. It also had garden suite potential in the back. If that's something that people are interested in terms of building an auxiliary little mini home in the back or laneway house. You could do a garden suite back there. The other thing I really liked about this house is it was completely turnkey. Obviously, it was adorable, but it also had the opportunity to add value over time.
Yes.
So I love that. That is the most amazing stage, especially when you're a first-time home buyer in the low-rise category. You're not buying something super over-renovated, but you're not buying something that's dilapidated, and you're not embarrassed to have your friends or family come over because it's so gross. You're in that nice sweet spot. It's all pulled together. It's really pretty. But then if you wanted to do a beautiful kitchen down the road, you could, and you're adding value to the house. If you wanted to upgrade the bathrooms and do something really gorgeous in there, you could. But you could also live with the bathroom the way it is and not be gagging every time you use your sink. So I like that sweet spot, which this property certainly had. And this property just looked so perfect, staged and styled. And our team did such an awesome job. And it really helped the listing do as well as it did. I don't think if it was vacant, it would show as well as it did. And that's why we are such big advocates of staging and styling and florals and photography and all of those things, because it's this type of romance that really gets the buyers in the door. All right, let's move into case study number 2. So this is a really amazing property, awesome clients. We've known them forever. And they had a very sexy loft, which is a different category to talk about. And this is located in Trinity Bellwoods proper on Claremont Street. And so again, if you follow us on Instagram, this one also
What's the tag, Kori?
_Fox Marin. If you follow us there, this property also did really well on social media because it was something to talk about because it was different and unique. Now, we both know, and our audience here knows, that condos aren't doing well, but lofts, however, have been performing well. And why? because they're one of a kind. You just can't replicate lofts. Now, this particular building or this particular section of the building is done by Bob Mitchell, who is an architect in Toronto that has done amazing conversions. And this section of the building is the old community hall that was flipped over to only 13 residential lofts. And so each of the lofts in this particular building are all unique and different, and you're not seeing one cookie cutter loft over another. So this particular space was interesting because it was only a 1-bedroom and 1 washroom. However, square footage wise, I'm just double checking, it just hovered under 900 square feet. But in addition to the square footage, it also had a terrace that was south facing, private, that's over 350 square feet. This loft is also a corner. So it had lots of natural light and it had 10-foot ceilings. And if you haven't noticed in the photos already, a working wood burning fireplace, which was just amazing. The sellers in this instance gave the property a little bit of an upgrade before we went to market, which was really smart. And they stayed very much on point with being very Scandi, meaning like minimal upgrades and keeping everything clean, which is what this property needed to look like. So fresh white paint, beautiful, like wide plank light floors, keeping them very raw looking, a nice bright kitchen, very soft lighting using warm light bulbs. Thank you very much for that. And then they just reconfigured their bedroom area to give it some more privacy because we all know that lofts often have a bedroom like smack in the middle of their open concept living and dining. So a fantastic property. In addition to the space itself, which you can obviously is gorge, it had its own separate garage off the laneway in the back of the building. And I'm talking like its own separate garage, like you would get at a freehold property with a roll-up door and everything.
Kind of felt like Batman, like Bruce Wayne,
Yes.
like coming out of that alleyway. Oh my God. In the Batmobile?
Totally. Like the garage was epic. And it's hard to describe it, but it's so cool that you have your own garage and you could put obviously your car there, or you could have a studio in there, or you could put all your extra crap in there if you wanted. And you had your own access to your suite coming through the back of the building, which was amazing. It also had ensuite storage, and then it also had additional storage in the basement level of the building. So it had just a lot going for it beyond its aesthetic. And then location being in Trinity Bellwoods is obviously a huge addition. The other thing I just want to add, and I know I could talk about this space for so long, so I'm trying to not be so long-winded, but this particular building is across from a fire hall. And so, you'd think, oh my God, across from a fire hall, this is such a red flag. But for this particular suite, this one was at the other side of the building. So you're actually on the opposite side of the fire hall. So you're not exposed to, the same in and out traffic of a fire station that you would be should you be on the east side of the building, which also made it awesome. So you can see aesthetically that this is just a very interesting property. The outdoor space was epic. And then our staging team just did an amazing job keeping all the white space. I think just made the pictures look incredible. And then going with this super mega statement couch.
I love the couch. The couch just was so bold.
Yes.
And the fireplace was so bold with the black and then the high ceilings and the natural light. Yeah, like you and I could be very happy living there. I thought it was just such a beautiful space with the indoor-outdoor transition in that location. I mean, my hipster days are well behind me.
Were you ever a hipster?
No.
Did hipster even exist?
No, but I felt like saying it. I thought I could get away with it. And then as it came out of my mouth, I knew I was going to get called on it. So
I was like, I don't think hipsters existed when we were in hipster age.
So for all the viewers out there, I was never a hipster.
No, you weren't.
No.
So we listed this property May 22nd of this year. And then we
listed...
listed...
look was big? The farmer look. Like the suspenders and the shirts. It was really weird. I don't know.
For the hipsters?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the hipsters. I thought you were like talking about, when you said farmer look, I was sort of going back to the 90s where the trucker hats were really popular.
Oh, yeah. No. I'm talking more like, Yeah, more
Yeah.
maybe 20s, maybe the 20s sort of.
Yeah. No, I totally
Yeah,
know what you're saying.
yeah,
Yeah. I could,
that was just too cool for me.
there's no way you would ever wear suspenders.
No.
So, this property too, just to mention here, we knew was special and we definitely wanted to have an offer date on it. And again, using the same philosophy that we did at Wheatfield, we didn't want to list it too low. We didn't want to list it too high. We wanted that sweet spot. So we listed it for 878 with an offer date 1 week later. And then we also hosted open houses for this particular property, which I was there for both days, the Saturday and the Sunday. And I don't think there was one person that came into the property that didn't love it. Is it for everybody? No, but everybody loved it. I think it was out of reach for some people in terms of price point. And then for some people, the location was too far away from their work. And maybe some couples might find it challenging because of the fact that it's just a 1 bedroom and you might not have a separate space if you work from home. So when you're living in a loft, you often are in these open concepts. But it certainly drove a lot of attention. We had over 30 private showings. On the open houses, we probably had 20 to 25 groups on both days. So about 50 groups across the Saturday and Sunday. We ended up eliciting 6 offers on the offer date. We sold for 109% of the list price. So it ended up selling for 978 and it sold within a week. So why did this property do well? Well, obviously it's one of a kind space. It's a corner, the location, it had exceptional scale, ceiling heights, amazing outdoor space. It was renovated, so turnkey, coming back to that theme. The staging was on point, the styling was on point, the photography was on point, the video was on point. The private garage was amazing. And also, this is a very small boutique building where one unit comes up in this building like every 2 to 3 years. And so, if you want to live in something that's not cookie cutter and you want to score it, you've got to be willing to jump in with both feet. And we certainly had buyers entertain that and were successful for our clients for that reason.
And it's interesting because as an agent, as a buyer agent, you're looking at this, and if your client is interested or you're offering on this, the challenge that you have and that your buyer may or may not realize is that if they aren't able to acquire the property successfully, it's not like next week there'll be another one of these coming out. Like, this is very, very rare. And so I go back and forth on the price where, I take that into consideration and the fact that I would love to live in it. But at the same point in time, it is only a 1 bedroom. That's a significant sale price for a 1 bedroom. And to see that level of activity on a condo is not something that I think most people would think would be possible in this environment. But we're here to say that this is what happened, and properties done right and that are unique enough will command this type of attention.
Totally. And the last thing I just want to say about boutique buildings, because we've sold quite a few properties in this category, is they can be challenged for some buyers because they tend to have maintenance fees that skew on the higher side for lesser of an offering, meaning you're getting 0 bells and whistles for your maintenance fees. There's going to be no amenities. There's going to be no 24 concierge, no package delivery, no gym, no pool. So a lot of times buyers have a hard time wrapping their heads around maintenance fees on smaller buildings with very few amenities. So something to consider if you're really budgeting and maintenance fees are a challenge for you to wrap your head around. That could be a whole other conversation. People get very annoyed by maintenance fees.
No, but if you're going to own real estate, you're going to have to pay to maintain it. If it's a house or a condo. The thing to keep in mind with these smaller units is while they're in high demand and while there's a premium attached to it and while there's not a lot of inventory for these type of properties, they're generally, not with this building, but generally in smaller complexes, there's issues not just with maintenance fees specifically, but with the status certificate and the financial wherewithal, because it's only 8, 9, 10, 15 units, depending upon the property, carrying all of the maintenance. It's not like you have a condo tower with 750 units or 450 units, and they're all contributing. And so if you have to do a new roof, it's divided by 450 or whatever the number is. So if you're thinking about buying a property like this, because it's unique and because it's private, there are some hidden risks, and it's really important to have a really good lawyer review the condo status certificate so that you clearly understand what's happening with the finances of the property.
Very good point. Thanks, Ralph. So let's move on to something I think is going to be really important for our viewers, especially for anyone who is considering selling something that's a bit more of a traditional condo. And on our case study podcast in the past, we haven't really talked about these because this condo category has been struggling. This section of the condo category has been struggling, just to reframe that. And so this particular condo did have a little bit of a struggle, not immense, but I want to talk about why we did what we did, why in the end we saw a sold price, and what was the opportunity here for the buyer and for the seller for that matter. So we're going to talk about 701 King Street West. So this is basically located at Bathurst in King. If you know the downtown core, you can see here for the visuals you're probably familiar with this building. If you drive by that southwest corner, you're going to see these three buildings, three towers that have been there since the 80s. Like these are like some of the OGs. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, what's so fantastic about the Summit, which is the name of this area, is that it offers so much in terms of a sense of community. So the buildings themselves might be older. The hallways might not have crazy sex appeal. There's not really a slick concierge desk when you walk in. But the building itself just offers basically everything you could possibly imagine, like an indoor pool, an outdoor pool, a full gym, fitness classes. You could book a hair appointment. There's squash courts. There's an outdoor playground. Like the list goes on and on. The amenities are insane. There's like workstations and a library. Like if you go underground to this building, it's like a full-on community center down there. Okay. Like you even have indoor access from the building right to the kitchen table grocery store on King Street.
That is amazing.
I know, like you didn't have to go outside. Like you would literally do not have to leave the building.
And some people don't.
Probably not. So it is a little bit on the older side, but the one thing I really love about it is that I feel really safe there. And it does have a sense of community and people really get to know their neighbors. And so if you're somebody who wants to live in a building, but you don't want to feel isolated in a tower where like no one talks to you in the elevator and your concierge is scrolling through his or her phone when you walk by and it feels very transient like a lot of condo buildings do. This is the exact opposite. And this is the perfect building for people who have like downsizer parents who want to like be near their grandkids, or perhaps a widow that, wants to live downtown but doesn't want to live in like a rager building, where there's parties all the time. This is like a very residential condo building that still offers a lot because it was built in a time where there was builder integrity. It was built with quality and the floor plans are big and you're not spending a shit ton per square foot like you are in some of the slicker buildings. So just to give you a sense of what this is a 2-bedroom with 1 washroom. Square footage wise, let me just double check. I think it was exactly, I know it was over 1,000 square feet. I think it was around
1,030.
Oh, 1,030.
Yeah.
Perfect. It did have parking and it had en-suite storage. The other thing to know about this, when we get over to the photos of it, is that the pride of ownership of this particular unit is like next level. I mean, the kitchen had been renovated, the bathroom had been renovated since the seller had moved in, but I mean, it was pristine. Pristine. Like you felt it.
And the seller's a longtime friend and viewer of our YouTube channel. So if he's watching,
shout out.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it was immaculate, this condo.
Why did I do I think I just did West Coast. I have no idea why I did that.
Oh.
Is that weird? Anyways, continue. I don't know why I did that.
So in this particular property, it didn't require a lot of initial TLC because of the pride of ownership, but we gave it a fresh coat of paint. We staged it, styled it, and then wanted to showcase some of its best attributes, including the fact that it had great views and a working wood-burning fireplace. It's a theme
Wow.
of today. And so why I wanted to put this one into the podcast today is that this wasn't just not a slam dunk. So Ralph and I initially listed this property low with an offer date. Okay, I know we sound insane doing that with a condo in this category right now. However, a neighboring property down the hall had a very successful sale using that strategy a couple weeks prior to us going to market. So we're like, okay, they got a decent, healthy price for their condo. Why don't we replicate their strategy because it worked for the seller? And so there was buy-in from the seller in this case and with Ralph and myself that, you know what, if it worked for somebody else, let's try it here. There's no harm in trying. And we were not successful on the offer date using this strategy. So full disclosure, this was not a successful first attempt. And so when that happens, what do you do? What you do is you terminate the listing. So you go off the market and then you relist the next day, generally at a higher price, closer to what the seller and the agents believe the property is worth. It is not an insane thing to do. Don't freak out if your agent suggests you do this. This happens in Toronto all the time. So you're going to say something, Ralph?
Oh, especially these days.
Yeah,
A lot
especially
more.
these days.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's exactly what we did. And our seller was just so awesome collaborating with us about this. Like, no attitude, not freaking out, got it, understood. We were communicating the whole time. We did exactly that. We terminated, we relisted the next day at a higher price. And then it took us about 11 days to sell the property from that point on. So we had about 15 plus showings on this property from beginning to end, including the initial strategy and the second strategy. We didn't have any open houses here. This type of building does not attract people for public open houses. We sold it 11 days on the market. The second time we were on the market, just as I mentioned, we negotiated with just one buyer and that buyer's agent. So we're just negotiating back and forth with one person. It sold for 96% of the asking price and ended up selling for $720, which was within the range that we had initially talked about with the seller from the get-go. So full transparency from beginning to end. And I think that we delivered for the client. The buyer got a great property and it was a win-win for everyone all around.
Now, a couple things. If this were 2022, this probably would have sold for about $850,000.
Yeah.
So we did sell it in relation to where the market is today, having seen a significant drop as to where it would have sold for about a year and a half ago. And I think the most interesting thing about this property is, or these buildings, which is really unique, is the units inside, or the inside each suite, they do not have laundry. They have shared laundry at the end of each hallway. I cannot tell you how many phone calls I was getting where it's like, buyer agents were like, what do you mean there's no laundry? And I'm like, well, if you know this building, it's kind of an institution. There's absolutely no laundry here. But according to our seller and the residents of the building, it's not a big deal. You just go to the end of the hall. It's on a card. And off you go. And if it's busy there, you can use any floor in the building. So it doesn't seem to bother the residents. And in return for that, you get an absolute ton of square footage and the opportunity to put full-size furniture in your condo with parking in around the $700,000 range at Bathurst King. Like, there's a tremendous amount of value built in there. And I think people are snapping these up, seeing where the price is relative to what they get at the location. It definitely is attractive to a certain class of buyer, specifically, as you were saying, Kori, downsizers.
100%.
Mm-hmm.
So this one sold because it was perfectly turnkey. Again, a theme of today, in fantastic condition, great location, incredible value, and a seller that was awesome to work with because he understood the environment that he was selling in and was not anticipating getting prices that aligned with 2021 and 2022. He was very reasonable and happy to work through a sticky process with us, knowing that market conditions were not in his favor. So that really helped for a winning outcome. All right, let's move on to the last case study of the day. This particular property is located in New Toronto. This is 66 7th Street, which is really hard to say
Yes.
and write out. So every time we were working on the marketing for this, I had to cross-reference to be like, is it 77 60th Street or is it six? I just couldn't wrap my head around it. And even today, I'm still struggling. So this is not our listing. This is our awesome team member, Ian Busher's listing, who is everyone's favorite agent. Everyone loves Ian, and he does such a great job working with his clients. And he is so hands-on with his listings. He's just there for his clients every step of the way to make sure he delivers on their aesthetic and make sure that he gets in there. He's an ex-general contractor and former Red Seal carpenter. So he's just amazing at dealing with a lot of the things that sellers find overwhelming when it comes to prepping the home for sale.
Plus, he's the most patient man in the world.
He truly is.
He is.
I know. I'm always oh my God, you are just too good.
Saint.
I'm evil compared to Ian Busher.
Ian Busher's a saint. We should make this a reel.
I know.
Little loop. Play it for him.
So this property was listed early June. Again, we listed this, or Ian did, with his client. So when I say I'm really referring to Ian. Listed it lower than market value at $115 million. Knowing what the sweet spot is, again, you're hearing a reoccurring theme. You're not listing too low. You're not listing too high. You're listing at that sweet spot. He probably had a lot of conversations with his sellers about the particular price and was hosting an offer date. All right. This particular property is on a 25 by 125 lot. So a nice, healthy lot. This is also a 2-story detached property offering 3 bedrooms and 3 washrooms. It did have parking, which was awesome because it has a private driveway, but it also has a built-in garage. And for a lot of people, that's an absolute win-win to have a garage, particularly in this price point, which we would consider to be your entry-level, low-rise property. So you're getting a detached house, which is a bonus, plus you're getting parking, plus you're getting a built-in garage. And then the aesthetic was also presented in a beautiful way. So it was partially staged. It was painted. We made sure it was thoroughly cleaned. There was light landscaping in the front and back, all of the things that need to be done to showcase the property at its highest and best. Now, this property also had a bit more of an artistic flair to it as well. So you can see here when I show you some of the photos, it had a black kitchen, which for some people, they would love that. Other people might feel more resistant because they're used to something more traditional like a white kitchen or a gray kitchen. And it had some very forward design decisions, which made the property really stand out in photography. And it certainly had incredible windows and views to a very leafy and inviting backyard. So I think it turned out really, really well, and I can see why it performed well just based on looking at these photos too. So in terms of results, Ian ended up getting over 30 private showings. His activity at the open houses on Saturday and Sunday were very robust. And what's really interesting, and Ralph, you'll probably be the better person to speak to this, he ended up selling this particular property on a bully offer. So let's talk about bully offers and how that came to fruition for this particular property. Ralph?
So if you're not familiar with what a bully offer is, aka a preemptive offer, it is a scenario whereby when a property is on the market, like this one was, with an offer date, it means that the buyer is going to look at all offers on a specific date and a specific time. Somebody really, really liked this house and really, really wanted to have this house, and they didn't want to wait until the offer date. So they submitted an offer, a preemptive offer, bullying their way ahead of the stated offer date. And that's a very nuanced process, which we could actually do a whole podcast on just talking about that. but they didn't want to compete for it. They came at a number that worked for the seller, and a deal was struck a day before the offer date. An offer was submitted and accepted by the seller the day before the offers at a price that was agreeable to all parties and 110% above list price.
Which is pretty phenomenal to see bully offer activity in a market like this when we see so many listings on the market. So it goes to show that Ian presented the property well. It was priced at the right spot. It was listed at the right time. And somebody was like, geez, I really could score myself a detached house that's pretty damn turnkey. And it's within my budget and I can have my own built-in garage. What do I need to do to go out and get it? And their agent got it done. And Ian was a great partner. And as were his selling clients, to collaborate with both parties to see that through. Again, for another win-win in different conditions. We wanted to share that because that's not something we're seeing all the time. And back in the heyday of the insanity of the market in 2021 and 2022, bully offers happened every day.
0 days on the market.
It was like impossible. Like you would book an appointment to show your buyer a property. And by the time you drove there to show it, you would get an email from the listing agent saying, there's a bully offer registered. I'm presenting in the next 30 minutes. Do you want to offer? I'm like, we haven't even seen it yet. So the fact that there was bully offer activity is very interesting to me. And again, we're not suggesting by any means, people out there, before you start freaking out in the comments section, that you should have FOMO. We just want to share what's happening behind the scenes for our clients, celebrate these wins, and let buyers and sellers know that transactions are still happening. People still need a place to live. People still need a community to be in. They need to be near schools for their kids. They need to raise their family and they need to figure shit out.
And some people view this time window as a period of opportunity. And it's difficult to ever know if you can time the bottom or the top of a market. But there are a lot of people who feel that we're starting to enter a window where there's a lot of value.
Yes, and there is a lot of value.
Yeah.
So if you're selling out there, your takeaways, please, is make sure your property is showing at its highest and best. Putting that extra elbow grease into your property and spending a little bit of money up front makes a huge difference.
It's common to spend in the range of 1% to 3% in bringing a property to market.
Yes. So do the work up front, make sure it's showing well, make sure it's staged, work with agents that know how to use a great photographer and show your property off in a beautiful way. Really, really, really dial in on pricing and have very transparent conversations with your agent about this and why you're doing things, and make sure you understand it. And do not be obnoxious and expect to sell it at record smashing prices. Please, you just won't. Like, it's just not going to happen. And then buyers out there, if you're interested in, looking, I think this is a great time to start doing your research, interviewing agents, seeing properties, going to open houses, tracking data, and just really understanding what's happening out there, because I do think opportunity is on your side.
People tend to do more interviewing on the seller side, thinking that the buyer side is just the door opener. There is bigger opportunity for mistake and regret on the buy side by getting bad advice. And one of the things we've seen in this market downturn that we hadn't seen in the past is that people who did stupid things and made bad purchases or bad investments would always end up okay in an up market. But going back to what Warren Buffett says, when the tide goes out, that's when you see who's not wearing a bathing suit. And a lot of people are paying for stupid decisions by getting bad advice. So do your research, interview, have lots of conversations, spend more time on figuring out who you're going to hire than planning a vacation. Because most people will do the latter before really, really getting into the responsibility that it makes when you're trying to set yourself up for your future self and your family. So lots to think about. If you have any questions and you want to reach out to me or Kori or the team, You know where to find us down below. We'd absolutely love to hear from you in the comments section, and everyone can tell us about how the world is about to end. And we will read them. We might not respond. We might respond. Who knows? But it pays to be nice. And we'd love to hear what you have to say, especially if it's constructive, good, bad, or ugly. Please be sure to hit that like or subscribe button. I'm Ralph. Kori, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ralph. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to spend an hour with us. We appreciate you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you.